You're watching The Open University on BBC Two. Now we turn our attention to the series Culture and Belief in Europe 1450 to 1600 and a compilation programme revising the themes of the course.
Here is a site very familiar to the contemporary tourist visiting Rome for a holiday. Familiar even if you've never visited the city. But just what kinds of things did it signify to the Romans and the Roman Church of the 1500s? Think about, for example, the sheer size of the Sant'Angelo Tower. Today we see all round us buildings much bigger than this. But for people of the time, it was one of the largest buildings within their experience. The Sant'Angelo Tower is, in fact, a Roman mausoleum adapted by the popes in their capacity as powerful princes and military leaders. We might ask how far this fortress could serve as a reminder for ordinary citizens of the civic power of the Pope and the sanctions available to him against challenges to his authority. You're now coming to the end of your study of A205. And like you, I've been looking back through the course to revive my memory of the material and the themes and the case studies. And what I've been concentrating on particularly are the television programmes, which you'll remember offer you case studies relating to the main themes of the course. And I'm proposing to have a look at one important theme, namely authority. Now, when we take a term like authority, we have to break it down into its different possible meanings, and at any point of our discussion, we have to make clear which aspect of that meaning we're actually taking on board. So I want now to take you back to Sant'Angelo's Tower with Tim Benton, where he discusses aspects of the authority of the popes.
I'd like you to think of Renaissance popes as three different kinds of person. As a Renaissance prince, concerned with military protection, comfort, a love of beautiful things, as the head of the church, and as the legitimate successor to the Roman emperors. Here in the Sala Paolina, Alessandro Farnese, Pope Paul III, adopted an even earlier namesake, Alexander the Great.
Alexander's defeat of the Persian Empire must have seemed a significant parallel for a papacy beleaguered by Muslim Turks and northern Protestants. The choice of scenes is intended to strengthen the personal identifications. Here, Alexander the Great is seen conserving a precious Homeric manuscript. As a humanist, Alexander Farnese could now benefit from the preservation of the antique poet's work.
Now, it might seem that the head of the Christian church is faced with something of a dilemma here. It's all very well to rely on the classical past as a source of authority and prestige, but it is, after all, a pagan past. And perhaps to us it seems scarcely appropriate for the Pope. But he certainly did get round this. And you'll see how he modifies the pagan impact by references to St. Paul, another citizen of Rome, but a Christian.
Alexander's military conquests are compared with St. Paul's achievements as a religious militant. Here he is converting the pagans. The theme of conversion, appropriate at a time when the Council of Trent was in session, is stated most clearly in the scene of St. Paul's own conversion on the road to Damascus.
Well, that's pretty lavish stuff, isn't it? Rich and splendid and luxurious. And perhaps you might feel that's much more appropriate for a secular ruler. So let's now go to Fontainebleau, the palace of Francis I. The young King Francis of Fontainebleau also chose to be identified as Roman Emperor, explicitly emphasising his personal influence as sovereign over his subjects. Royalty certainly make similar kinds of statements in terms of size and status. This impressive hunting lodge was just one of the homes of the 20-year-old King of France. The style and subject of the decoration show how attracted Francis was to the classical past, and he engaged the finest Italian craftsmen to imitate it. Everywhere we turn, we see the salamander, the personal emblem of the king, celebrating his power. Both inside and out, the statement of authority is unmistakable for the visitor. Remember that Francis saw his interior decor as important propaganda, and he had certain scenes repeated in a set of tapestries which could be moved from palace to palace to spread the message more widely. And kingly authority is demonstrated not only by displays such as these, but by other works of art too.
For well we know, no hand of blood and bone can gripe the sacred handle of our scepter unless he do profane, steal, or usurp. And though you think that all, as you have done, have torn their souls by turning them from us, and we are barren and bereft of friends, yet know, my master, God omnipotent, is mustering in his clouds on our behalf armies of pestilence, and they shall strike your children, yet unborn and unbegot, that lift your vassal hands against my head and threat the glory of my precious crown.
The argument of Richard II, the play, an argument which is often lost in the personalities which are involved in the play, is to define what is a king. Because I think the king who begins the play, King Richard is not King Bolingbroke, and that's not just simply a change of name. I think there is a change of obligation and the way in which we're asked to look at king. Indeed, we're asked to think quite hard about what we expect of a king. It's a strange play in as much as within 10 minutes of the opening of the play, we have a king accused of a murder, and within 5 minutes of the close of the play, we have a king accused of murder. Now, between those two accusations, the meat in the sandwich, as it were, is what is a king? What does kingship entail? I think that's the beginning of an argument and a discussion about kingship, which carries certainly through the rest of Shakespeare's histories, and of course spills over into many of his other plays, which is a discussion on the nature of authority. It seems to me a question which Elizabethan society particularly was concerned with, was occupied with, and in the theatre of all places, it was a question that could be discussed. It could be discussed because it could be offered as a fiction.
Seize the crown.
So a different kind of evidence for you to consider is Shakespeare's dramatic account of the battle over authority.
Crown like a deep well that owes two buckets filling one another. The emptier ever dancing in the air, the other down unseen and full of water. That bucket down and full of tears am I, drinking my griefs whilst you mount up on high.
The church validated the authority of Richard II, but it touched also the lives of his common subjects. For example, people were encouraged to visit shrines, like this one in Loreto, the House of the Virgin Mary, which is still today a place of popular pilgrimage.
This huge basilica was rebuilt around the relic. Work began in 1470, and over the next 50 years, various architects from all over Italy were brought in to supervise. At its heart was the magnificent marble casing containing the relic of the Virgin's house. At least 19 different sculptors worked on the marble carving, initially under the direction of the Tuscan sculptor Andrea Sansovino.
There's a paradox here, really. Here's this great popular shrine in the heart of Italy. And as it gets richer, partly through the loyal patronage of a semi-literate population, so the buildings look more and more like the buildings of the papal prince. I mean, these are not humble buildings, are they? They're buildings which assert authority. Further, to give the Christian story authority, the style in which it's depicted again proclaims the inheritance of the classical world. Its Renaissance style refers to ancient Rome.
The Nativity, again carved by Andrea Sansovino, shows his mastery of descriptive detail. With the visiting shepherds, he provides a portrait of the very first Christian pilgrims.
You will recall that Loreto, on the Adriatic coast to the north of Rome, was on the eastern edge of Christian Europe, close to the expanding Muslim world. Islam was posing a real threat to European Christianity. Constantinople, nowadays called Istanbul, was at the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Here, too, authority is expressed by a combination of the religious and the secular.
Sultan Suleiman was not only an absolute ruler of fabulous wealth, but a man given to carrying the responsibilities commensurate with his status as the shadow of God on earth.
Suleiman's authority is expressed both in his role as beneficent ruler and in his donating a magnificent mosque, which is both place of worship, university, and hospital.
The importance of calligraphy in Islam matches the importance of the word in Christianity and Judaism. But light is the equal of the word as a manifestation of God. Thus, the curtain walls of the mosque carry as many windows as engineering would permit. And in the dome, the quotation from the 24th Surah and its famous eulogy of light combines them both in this sun, which is the greatest star.
It is surprising that when we go from the Süleymaniye to the complex of the Escorial, palace of the head of Catholic Spain, we can see marked similarities. Here, too, we have a place of worship, a hospital, a place of learning, and a mausoleum. Philip II was particularly concerned with the rituals of his own burial in the splendor of the basilica itself.
And this is what it was all about. As 10,000 masses for the dead were sung in monasteries all over the Spanish Empire, and in the presence of his family, his court, and his monks, Philip was laid to rest in a tomb right here under this step in front of the high altar where the priest celebrates the Mass.
It is an almost perfect synthesis of religious and royal authority. But let's turn now to another aspect of authority, intellectual authority and the power of the word. King Philip had privileged access to knowledge and scholarship in his magnificent library. One of the most crucial developments at this time was the extension of the word through printing. The potential influence of presses like these in the Christopher Plantin Museum in Antwerp was something much feared by the authorities.
Being a printer-publisher in those days was a risky business. Executions were everyday occurrences in Antwerp, as can be seen from this Hogenberg engraving. Antwerp printers were not immune. 3 had been executed between 1542 and 1555, and several others had spent time in the dungeons of the Steen. In the early 1560s, Plantin himself came under suspicion. He feared that his association with heretical sects had allowed malevolent slanderers to turn the King of Spain against him.
Plantin wanted the king's financial assistance for his most ambitious project. This was to be an official multilingual edition of the Bible, which was to prove his orthodoxy for all time.
We have here a copy of the first volume, which is of the Old Testament, and you can see here that it was printed in 4 languages: Hebrew, Chaldaic, Greek, and Latin.
And it was King Philip who commissioned this Bible, and we find a copy in his library at the Escorial. This volume contains the translation by St. Jerome in Latin, which is known as the Vulgate. Kings and popes relied on the authority of the word to uphold their positions. But of course the word was available to their critics as well. And it is this situation that Christopher Marlowe exploits in Dr. Faustus.
Jerome's Bible, Faustus. View it well. Stipendium peccati mors est. Stipendium. The reward of sin is death. That's hard. Si peccasse negamus, fallimur et nulla est in nobis veritas. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and there is no truth in us. Why then, belike, we must sin, and so, consequently, die. We must die, an everlasting death.
What doctrine call you this? Que sera, sera. What will be, shall be.
Divinity, adieu.
Faustus turns his back on the authority of the scriptures. The power of the word is also invoked in the 3 estates.
Preachers be!
Look what St. Paul writes unto Timothy.
So, the Bible is Jane's authority for challenging the Pope.
I never read that, yes, or read it yourself!
Sit still, my lord. You need not for to brawl. These are the very words of the Apostle Paul.
Some says, Ben, that wore the crown of thorn, it had been good that Paul had ne'er been born.
You mun know, my lord, St. Paul's intent. Sir, read ye never the New Testament?
No, sir. The hymn that our Lord Jesus called, I read never the New Testament, nor old.
Jane and divine correction are eventually triumphant.
Curse me, my parents that engendered me!
But by the second part of Marlowe's play, we face an alternative outcome, and we're confronted with the consequences of Faustus's challenge.
No, Faustus. Curse thyself. Curse Lucifer, that hath deprived thee of the joys of heaven. Ah! It strikes! It strikes! The bloody time to air, Lucifer will flee quick to hell! shall ne'er be found. My God! My God! Look so fierce on me! And it's a serpent. Let me breathe a while. Ugly hell! Keep not! Come on, Lucifer! I'll burn my books. Stop, police!
We've had plenty of examples of male authority, popes and kings. But of course there were powerful women who exercised considerable authority. Through 4 marriages, Bess of Hardwick amassed a fortune. She was a great builder of houses, employing Smithson, the prestigious architect, to express her wealth and reinforce her sense of personal authority. It's surely not a coincidence that she selects for her embroideries the topics of legends and stories about famous women.
This cushion cover shows the rape of Europa. This collection reminds us that embroidery was one of the few recreations considered suitable for women in the 16th century. That Hardwick has one of the finest collections of the period is unsurprising, since it was preeminently a woman's house. Conceived by her, and in the case of many of the embroideries, furnished by her taste and skill as well. Originally, these embroideries would have been in the private and state rooms. The delightful frieze was also designed by Abraham Smith and his plasterers. Representing once again the court of Diana, the goddess of hunting and chastity, an allusion to Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. Venus chastising Cupid continues the catalogue of triumphant female deities.
In this programme, we've offered you some reminders about the theme of authority and its different aspects. Aspects like imperial authority, religious, secular, and intellectual authority. Now, do the same thing yourself. Take the other themes and work through to find the detailed evidence which will help you to support an argument or develop an idea, just as we have offered details from television programmes about authority. You'll find the Broadcast and Cassette Handbook an invaluable resource to refresh your memory and to help you to collect the detailed evidence. Good luck in the exam.